If I talk about the third characteristic of a chemical change, so the third characteristic of a chemical change is formation of precipitate. Now, before we talk about the formation of precipitate, first of all, we will be talking about this precipitate. What do we mean by this term? So, this precipitate is generally in the short form, as the abbreviation, we use the word PPT for this. And this precipitate is defined as the insoluble substance that is formed when we mix two soluble substances. Like if I have one soluble substance, one liquid substance in one container, in the another container I have another different substance which is also present in liquid state. When we mix these two liquids in a container, so there I have dropped this first liquid and the second liquid B also, and these two liquids are soluble. So when these two liquids will be mixed, a soluble substance is formed with an insoluble substance. The insoluble substance will settle down at the bottom and it will stick to the surface of this container. And this insoluble substance formed by the mixing of two soluble substances is termed as precipitate or PPT. Like if I talk about the reaction of or the mixing of AgNO3 silver nitrate to sodium chloride, that is NaCl. So when we take the solution of these two, I am taking the aqueous solution of these two. When these two are made to be reacted, by the reaction sodium nitrate solution, liquid sodium nitrate is formed that has colorless solution, that is colorless, and with this formation of sodium nitrate, white PPT of silver chloride is also formed. Like here I am taking AgNO3, and in this AgNO3 when we mix NaCl solution, you will be finding a colorless solution which is due to the formation of NaNO3, and some solid you will be finding at the inner surface of this test tube stick to this inner surface of test tube, and this solid that is going to be formed here is insoluble, and this solid is AgCl. So this AgCl is insoluble substance and it can be termed as precipitate, which can be indicated by the downward arrow. Now the another example of the formation of precipitate is when this barium chloride is made to react with dilute sulfuric acid H2SO4. By the reaction, a solution of hydrochloric acid is formed with the formation of insoluble barium sulfate that has white color. So here the barium sulfate is working as a precipitate of white color. The another example for this is when we made to react iron sulfate solution FeSO4 with sodium hydroxide solution. By the reaction, the aqueous solution of Na2SO4 is formed with the formation of green color precipitate, and this precipitate is due to the formation of ferrous hydroxide. So this is the presence of green precipitate, and this formation of precipitate is again the another kind of indication for a chemical reaction. Now if we talk about the next change that is for the chemical that indicates the presence of chemical reaction or a chemical change, is change in energy. There is any change in energy, so always it indicates the presence of a chemical change, or it can be taken as a characteristic of a chemical change. Now before we talk about that this change occurs in a chemical reaction or in a chemical change, first of all we will be talking about that why in a chemical change the change in energy occurs. So before this we have talked about the reaction between AgNO3 and NaCl. When these two are made to react, just before of this we have seen that the formation of silver chloride precipitate is with the formation of sodium nitrate NaNO3. So these reactant, here we can see that this at the initial state the silver was in the combined state with this NO3 radical, and when this participates in the change, this silver now breaks the bond with this NO3 and it combines with chlorine that is bonded with sodium. So initially this silver was bonded with NO3 and sodium was bonded with chlorine, but when they participates in this change, now this nitrate, this force of attraction, that can also be termed as bond, chemical bond, breaks between silver and nitrate, same as the chemical bond between sodium and chlorine breaks, and a new bond is formed, or a new force of attraction is developed between silver and chlorine. So if I talk about the chemical reaction or the chemical chain, here the bond formation between the new formed products and the bond breaking, here we can find that the bond is going to be break between silver and nitrate. So in the chemical chain, the bond breaking and the bond formation, both the process occur simultaneously, and the nature of this bond breaking, since this bond breaking is a kind of force of attraction between two different kind of atoms, and when we want to break this bond, it will require some energy, and since this process requires some energy, so this kind of process where energy is required can be termed as endothermic process. And if I talk about the another kind of process that is occurring in this chemical change, is a new bond is going to be formed between those atoms which was not initially bonded. So in this process of chemical change, bond formation also takes place. And when the bond formation will occur, it will result in the form of release of energy. And since the energy is released here, so this process can be termed as exothermic process. To memorize this, you can divide this exothermic term in two short terms. Here the exo word can be used as the exit, and the thermic, this word indicates the presence of heat. So when this heat is evolved or it exits from the reaction, this process can be termed as exothermic. And opposite to this, when the heat is required to make the process occur, this process will be termed as endothermic process. So here we can see that whenever a chemical change occurs, both the exothermic and the endothermic processes occur. But what the net result is seen here, according to this, the chemical change, what the net energy change is going on in a chemical change will be decided. Like if the energy gain in a chemical change, or the energy given to break the bond, is greater than the energy released by the bond formation, then in this condition the net resultant process will be giving off energy. And as we have seen earlier, that if energy is given or energy is required by the reaction or by the change, then this process will be termed as endothermic change. So the net process will be endothermic. Opposite to this, if the energy required by the reaction or energy given by us to make the change occur is lesser than the energy released by the bond formation, then the net process will be of energy released. And in this condition, since energy is released, so the process will be termed as exothermic process. So here we can see that whenever the change in energy occurs in a chemical change, that may be the endothermic change, or if the net and the net process is of the release of energy, that will be termed as exothermic change. Now we will be talking about the various examples of endothermic and exothermic changes. When we made, as we have seen in the definition, that the change in which the energy is required or the change that is accompanied by the absorption of energy is defined as endothermic change. Like when we made this carbon that is in solid state reacted with sulfur that is again in solid state, by the reaction carbon disulfide liquid is formed with the formula CS2, and in this process the net resultant is, to make this process occur, energy is required, so this energy will be written at the side of reactant, and this process will be termed as endothermic change. Same as if I talk about the process of photosynthesis, so we all must be aware about this, that for the photosynthesis process, it only occurs in the presence of sunlight. So since in the presence of sunlight, carbon dioxide molecules reacts with the molecules of water, and to make this process occur, light energy by the sun is required. So this process can be taken as the example of endothermic change. And as the resultant of this process, the molecule of glucose with the formation of oxygen gas and some molecules of water will be there. So these are the example of endothermic changes. Now we will be talking about some examples of exothermic changes. Exothermic change is defined as the change where the energy is released. Like if I talk about the heating of magnesium or the burning of magnesium, then when this magnesium in the process of burning reacts with oxygen, by the reaction magnesium oxide is formed and the net process is of the release of energy. So with this magnesium oxide, energy will also be released. So this can be taken as the example of exothermic change. Same as if I talk about the adding of water to quicklime. So quicklime is calcium oxide. When it is reacted with water, by the reaction a lots of heat is released. That is why while doing the whitewashing, when we made this reaction occur, that is also termed as chuna bhigona in Hindi. So when this reaction occurs, we always prefer to make this reaction occur in a metallic container, and generally we prefer iron container or steel container. We never ever do this reaction in a earthen pot or in a container or in a bucket made by plastic, since a lots of energy is released in this reaction and this energy can damage the earthen pot or the plastic container. By the reaction of these two, the molecule of calcium hydroxide will form with the release of energy. So since energy we are getting at the product side, this is an example of exothermic change. The another examples are burning of coal, burning of CNG gas, or the burning of all the fuels can be taken as the example of exothermic change. And the last characteristic of this chemical change is change in physical state. If there is change in the physical state of the substance, then this change again indicates that there may be a chemical change. Like if I made this hydrogen, which is in gaseous state, reacts with oxygen, which is again in gaseous state. By the reaction, liquid water molecules are formed, and here we can see that in the initial physical state of the substance is gaseous state, while in the change or in the process they are going to be converted into liquid state. So since the change in the physical state is there, that can indicate that this is an example, this may be an example of chemical change. But always again, it's not a confirmatory test for a chemical change. Like if we talk about the liquid water, so when it is heated, it is converted into steam, that is gaseous water, and here the change in physical state is, but this is not an example of chemical change since the composition remains same. So this change in physical state can also occur in the physical change, but sometimes this change in physical state indicates the presence of chemical change. The another example for this is when we made the ammonia, which is in gaseous state, react with HCl gas. By the reaction, solid ammonium chloride is formed, and here again the physical state is going to vary. The initial substances are in gaseous state, the final substance is in solid state. So this change in physical state is going to indicate the presence of chemical change again. So these are about the characteristics of chemical changes.